have a disorder called arteriovenous malformation. Can you tell us a little bit about it and how you sustained it, I should say?
Yes. So when I was 15 years old, I had one day just symptom of stomach pain. And over the course of the day, it kind of got worse. And then by the end of the night, I couldn't move my legs. So they took me to the hospital and they said, well, we can't find anything wrong with you on the surface because this was in 1993. And the only way to detect an AVM is through an MRI.
Okay.
So it wasn't until the next day after they really did all their blood tests and x-rays and they were like, we don't know why you can't move your legs. Um, they actually did an MRI and they came out and they said, you have an arteriovenous malformation. And of course, we were like, what is that? And they basically explained it's super rare. Like 1 in a million people have it in the spinal cord. It's usually in the brain and usually fatal actually, but mine was in within the spinal cord, which makes it even more rare. And it can there's some debate now because it's so rare, the research is
Mhm.
still going on about it. But the simplest way to put it is it's similar to an aneurysm, like a blood
Okay. Yeah,
vessel
right.
um, that ruptures. It could rupture, it may not rupture. I mean, it totally is random.
Mhm.
And when this happened,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. When this happened to me, the first time I learned about it, they said, okay, well, the way to describe it is okay, it might have been there since birth, not hereditary, but congenital, and that you had this blood vessel in your spinal cord, and at some point, it was probably going to rupture.
Mhm.
And the same goes for any, I mean, AVMs, I'm told, can happen anywhere in the body.
Okay.
But for me, since it was in the spinal cord, it was most likely going to cause some paralysis because anything that touches the nerves in the spinal cord will damage the spinal cord and cause paralysis. So at that point, once mine ruptured, it was like any other spinal cord injury. Then I was paralyzed from it, and they needed to go in and do surgery and remove it so that it didn't happen again, because sometimes they can re-rupture.
So you were diagnosed with this, or this was sustained when you were 15. So you were a teenager, and like all teenagers, we are we are developing at a rapid pace with our bodies, our maturity, our minds, and so forth. So being confined to a wheelchair, how did that affect uh, not your maturity in terms of you know personality and all that, but in terms of maturing with your body, uh, and, you know, kind of quote unquote like fitting in, because that was definitely probably a little bit of a struggle, you know.
Yeah, at the time I thought, gosh, like, why does this have to happen now? Because it was a time in my life where I felt like I was finally almost growing into my awkward body.
Mhm.
I was very, very skinny growing up, and to the point where I was kind of made fun of it. And called bones and sticks, and my mom always worried I was like anorexic, even though like I
Right.
constantly ate. I just I was really tall and lanky,
Right.
and there's nothing wrong with that, but I never felt um, like I was that people could overlook certain things about me physically to the point where I always felt a little bit insecure about my physicality.
Mhm.
Um, Fast forward to age 15, where I felt like I was kind of growing into my body and accepting it and meeting new people in high school and, kind of getting noticed by the boys. And it was a time in my life where I felt like everything was kind of coming together. And then, boom,
Mhm.
life was like, oh, okay, we're gonna throw you in a wheelchair for life and see how that goes. And so, yeah, at first I was devastated because I thought, oh my gosh, how am I gonna go back to high school in a wheelchair, much less live the rest of my life in a wheelchair? I had no reference to anybody else that had been paralyzed or anybody else that had lived in a wheelchair in my personal life, even in my community. So I didn't have any type of, oh, this is fine, you can live a normal life and you'll be okay. So for me, it was uncharted territory, and that's what made it so scary. and also, like you said, like trying to fit in. So here I am, like taking 4 months out of my first year in high school in 10th grade and leaving. And then people also not really knowing what happened to me. I mean, I was literally in school one day and the next day, like, I wasn't. And then people, like, even my friends were like, what? Like, you can't walk? Like, you know what I mean? There wasn't any actual like story that necessarily happened that made sense to us.
So you have stated that being paralyzed is, is your perfect life challenge. Can you describe how you came to this conclusion or quote, and what does it mean to you, and you preaching it to others?
The first thought that I had one day when I was thinking about me getting paralyzed as a challenge, I thought, man, like this kind of fits my personality. When I started to think, like, because one of my friends was like, yeah, you know that now that I know you and I've gone through, your paralysis with you as a friend, like now if it, God forbid, ever happened to me, I would know how to deal, and I don't think I would be as devastated as you were not having that. And I thought about that, and she's like, I still don't think I could handle it. And I was like, I don't know about that. And I was thinking, like, well, I wouldn't have thought I could handle being paralyzed if you had asked me before. In fact, if you had asked me, I would have said, oh, I'd rather like die, because I didn't think that you could live a happy life in a wheelchair. So, but once I got over that and realized, wait, this kind of fits me and it fits my life. And I think that every single person in the world has a challenge that is made for them. And that challenge is made to make them more of who they are and who they're supposed to be, and also make them grow.
Mhm.
And this did all of that for me and more. And now at this point I look back on it and say, like, I'm really glad it happened. It gave me my particular purpose. Not everybody would feel that way, but I know people that have gone through things where I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't think I could deal with that. And maybe I could, or maybe I couldn't handle it, if I was actually thrown it. But you don't know until you deal with it. But overall, I love to figure things out. And being in a wheelchair is that. It's always finding a new or a cool, innovative way of doing something that may be a little bit different. And I thrive on that.
So you also put emphasis and are active in raising awareness on the life challenges for people who have AVM. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing and the advocacy work?
The most important thing about AVM advocacy right now is education. And that is because it is so rare. And a lot of people get misdiagnosed
Mhm.
with it, which causes complications for AVM patients because the longer you wait, the more damage it will cause. And so for me, this is some people have asked me, how come some people end up like walking right away, especially football players that break their necks and when they're playing. It's because one of the reasons they know now that causes more damage into the spinal cord when there's trauma is because of the swelling, right? That's like causing more surface area in your spinal cord to be damaged. So they know that like steroid application is a game changer when it comes to spinal cord injury. So for me, them waiting a day to even do anything, to even find out that I had an AVM, did prolong and maybe cause more spinal cord damage. This happens a lot with other people that come to doctors with like headaches a lot, or neurological symptoms where they're just like, we can't find anything wrong with you. Now that's changing because of technology.
Mhm.
And it used to be when I first got paralyzed, I would go to like a doctor or something, and you know they would be like, what's an AVM? Like, I don't, and they're in the medical field. Now fast forward, I go to like a doctor and they're like, you have an AVM? Like, that's so rare. And they've actually at least heard of it.
Right.
But they still know that it's like, wow, I've never known anyone that had one.
Mhm.
But just like anything else, when there's more awareness and people look out for it more, they know that it's more common than that. And so that helps. So a lot of the advocacy right now is raising money for research.
So you are well known, among other things, but for or not, I won't say it's yours, but for the reality show Push Girls in 2012 that you were in, which chronicles your life as well as other people that have spinal cord injuries and are wheelchair users, day to day, how just life in general, whatever, your day-to-day lives. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience? And do you think that Push Girls, or just in general, uh, the stigmatization around people with wheelchairs, do you think that has been reduced, whether it be through Push Girls or just over the years in general?
I always knew that the media would be a super powerful tool to be able to break stereotypes about spinal cord injury, and especially even the female image
Mhm.
of women with spinal cord injuries or even any disability. And I remember being 15 right after getting paralyzed and thinking like, gosh, like I feel like this would be so much easier for me to deal with if I just had a role model, or not even even if it wasn't somebody in my own personal life, like someone I could see on TV and
Mhm.
watch and be like, oh wow, like they're cool, like if they're doing it, like I could do this, and it was something that I thought, well, if I'm feeling that way, there must be other
Mhm.
females that females or males, but like people that, especially young people that get paralyzed or develop a disability that have no idea what to do and are looking for those role models, and
Mhm.
they may or may not come into contact with them in their individual life now, more so with the internet, because people can reach out to other people
Mhm.
through social media. But um, but specifically, I think the mass media is a huge tool because that does reach out to people that aren't necessarily even searching for it. And that means society in general, where I feel like the most advocacy needs to be done is to change their perceptions about disability. Because we're kind of like preaching to the choir when we talk to like our own community, because
Mhm.
it's like, well, yeah, of course a girl can be attractive and date and get married and work and have a fulfilled life. Of course we know that, but newly injured people or people that have no connection to disability at all do not know that.
So lastly, you have another quote that you've stated that I still have the journal that I had when I was 15. I wrote an entry that was basically, I want to die. I can't imagine myself being in a wheelchair all my life. If you had to go back based on how much you've accomplished, overcome where you are in your life, what would you have told your 15-year-old self on that day?
It's so funny because the advice that I would give myself is actually advice that a girl came into my hospital room,
Mhm.
who had gotten into a spinal cord injury at 18, and at the time she was 30 something, with
Wow.
married with kids, and she came in to kind of mentor me. And at the time I was in that place where I wanted to die, and I thought, this really sucks and I am not gonna accept this. And I was in my really dark place. And I remember she came in and she said, don't worry. Everything you're worrying about right now is going to become second nature. You
Mhm.
can live the life you want to live, and everything's going to be fine. And I remember thinking, like, I literally remember that she's just saying that. Like, and she even said that. She said, I know that right now you're thinking I'm full of crap.
Mhm.
And she's like, but I guarantee you one day you're going to feel that way. And so it's funny because I would give that same advice to me, but because I didn't take it in that moment, what I would tell myself on top of that advice is to wait one more day.
Mhm.
I would say, hold on one more day. If you can make it through one more day, one more hour, one more minute, one more,
Mhm.
and then reevaluate. Because my journey really was like by a day by day basis, sometimes a minute by minute basis. It was
Mhm.
really like, how can I get through this minute? But if I could just, I kept telling myself, I'm going to hold on one more minute, things are going to turn around. And that's what kept me going eventually. So if I could just tell myself, keep doing that, keep waiting one more minute, one more day, and see how things evolve.
No, I agree. This was so wonderful, Mia. By the way, I love
This
your name.
was so
It
fun.
was so fun.